Yo, comrades. So we're gonna call this next part the Factor 3 arc, just because I don't know. I'm sure they'll get to it eventually. But this first issue of the X-Men, which I think is number 33 or something, I want to say. Maybe it's somewhere in the mid 30s, right? So this thing's been going on for just about 3 years now, because I think they had monthly. I think they might have started off bi-month, like once every other month releases, but I think at this point it's monthly. Anyway, so the X-Men are all kicking it. They're trying to fix Cerebro so they can use it to find Professor X. And Beast and Cyclops are kind of stressed out about that. Jean Grey's like, "Oh, guys, I got to go back to college and shit." So, but then she gets a call. She gets like a payphone call from, I want to say Ralph, not Ralph, the other brother, Ted. I think it's Ted. Ted, who is like kind of her friend from her like question mark friend without benefits from Metro College, which I think it's the same one that Spider-Man went to or goes to. Anyway, he's like, "Help, can you contact the X-Men and tell them I need help?" And everyone's like, "Oh man, this motherfucker definitely knows we're the X-Men, but whatever, let's go see what he needs." His brother's doing the Cobalt stuff, so maybe there's something crazy. So Jean because Jean's like back at Metro, I think, or she's not like around with the X-Men. I think she's in the dorm. Because we meet, oh god, it was her roommate. I'm trying to remember her name. The roommate comes up again later as like a kind of reoccurring character that's in Jean's life. Don't know why I can't remember it off the top of my head. They said it once, and then I kind of moved on. Anyway, so she calls the X Mansion, and Warren and Bobby are like respond to the call. So they all head over to the lab. Warren and Bobby pick her up in like one of the X-Jet / helicopter vehicles. And there they see Ted, and Ted explains the whole story. So he's like, "Yeah, my brother is working on this thing," and he was like, "Hey, brother, come look at this. We're gonna go to the center of the Earth and use Cobalt to do something, and something, something." And it's like, "Wow, that's awesome." And then Tyrannus shows up. Who's Tyrannus? I don't remember. He's like a Fantastic Four villain, maybe, or he's just kind of a crazy guy. He lives under the Earth, and he hates the Mole Man. And the Mole Man is a Fantastic Four villain. In fact, he's the first Fantastic Four villain, if I recall correctly. And they both live under the Earth, like in the center of the Earth. And they both like fight it out and hate each other. So Tyrannus grabs, he knocks Ted out, giving him like a cute little bandage to sport later on when the X-Men show up, and grabs Ralph and pieces the fuck out of there. And so Ted's like, "You gotta help him." And they're like, "Well, how are we gonna center of the Earth?" And he's like, "Behold, my brother created this ridiculous like Bohr machine decades before Elon Musk came up with his idea." And he's like, "You can use this to tunnel down there and find him and rescue my brother." And then, because he's going to use like the Cobalt technology to create some terrible thing. And the X-Men are like, "Why don't you just?" It sounds like a job for the U.S. Army, to be completely honest. And, "Oh, I know it probably is, but I'm like very concerned if the army rolls down into the underworld that Tyrannus will kill my brother, and I think you guys can save him and stuff." And they're like, "All right, cool, man." And he's like, "All right, I'm going to come too." And they're like, "No, I don't think so. You're going to stay here because we can't. You have no superpowers, and that's retarded." So they get in the Bohr machine, Bobby, Angel, or Bobby, Warren, and Jean, and they dive into it, and they're like, we found it, hooray. And they land the machine, and they get out, and they're kind of looking around, and they're like referencing Jules Verne, obviously. And then the Mole Man shows up. He's like, "What are you doing in my domicile?" And so they're about to fight him, and then he sends like his mole people after him, and so they fight them for a little bit, and they kind of, Mole Man disappears. And then they start wandering around, trying to figure out what's going on and trying to find Tyrannus. And then they enter like the Rivers of Lethe, which is like a Greek reference, if I remember correctly, where they lose their memories. And then when they wake up, they are with the Mole Man, and he's showing them his like diamond statue, monster mech thing that he created. And he's like, "Behold, servants, we're going to use this to fight Tyrannus, because fuck that guy." And the X-Men are like, "Tyrannus, that sounds really familiar, but we all know, I guess we're servants of the Mole Man, because he called us his servants, and we're just standing here like fucking around." And then Mole Man's like, looks like they're starting to remember stuff. I better like shock him back out. And he's like, "Aha, behold, my thing. Now go fight Tyrannus and stuff." Meanwhile, Cyclops and Beast, who were fucking around, I think they were just up working on Cerebro while everyone else was like sleeping and doing other stuff. They're like, "Oh, hey, Angel told us that we needed to come down here and help them." And so we were finally able to, like, got the message or whatever. So they take, like, instead of using the Bohr machine to launch themselves deep, deep under Earth, they just use, like, a rope. Guess it wasn't that deep. So they get down there, they meander about for a little bit, and they find the machine, and like, oh, we'll take the machine, and we'll use it. It like hovers also, I guess, because it goes over the River Leith. And they're like, good thing we're not out there losing our memories and shit. And then at some point they get access to like a gun that cures the effects of the River Leith. I didn't want to go back and look because I'm busy and I was kind of just flipping through this because there's so many words. But I do not remember when they got this gun. But it's important because the X-Men kind of go to Tyrannus to fight him for the Mole Man, for Mole Man supremacy. Meanwhile, Ralph has coded his diamond, because Tyrannus also has like a diamond mech statue creature. So he's coded that in his quote-unquote impervious materials. And then Tyrannus threatens to kill him if he doesn't make him more, and Ralph's like, I'm not gonna make you anymore, I'll just die. And it's like, bro, you already made him like an indestructible monster. And then Ralph like thinks to himself, he doesn't understand the weakness involved. So then the X-Men, Bobby, Warren, and Jean, sent by the Mole Man, go to fight Tyrannus, and Tyrannus sends out his monster thing, and Ralph is like, aha! There's a weakness. I made it not impervious, so the X-Men are able to defeat it. And then they start to head back to like the Mole Man to like celebrate. And then at some point, Cyclops, I think they get to the Mole Man place, and then Cyclops and Beast show up. And then Cyclops uses his like antidote gun to cure them. And then they beat up the Mole Man. And then they go to Tyrannus and rescue Ralph and beat him up. And he's like, all right, X-Men, you win. I'll let you leave alive. And they're like, the fuck you will. We just beat your ass. The Tyrannus is like, what are you going to do about it? And then we see the X-Men with Ralph like flying away in like the cobalt borer thingy. And one of them's like, do you think that we did the right thing back there? And then we see Mole Man and Tyrannus hanging out in the River Leith being like, I know I'm important, but I don't remember exactly what. And Mole Man's like, I feel like I keep losing my memory, and I also feel like I created some sort of device to cure this, but I don't remember how to do that again. And it's like, dun dun dun, the So victory, I guess? Good job, everybody. You won. And the Mole Man and Tyrannus are out of the picture for at least one issue of this comic that we're currently reading. Oh man, good stuff. The next issue starts off with our homie Banshee flying around the European mountains looking for Factor 3. He's making quite a ruckus. There's a goat herder that makes a comment about it, and eventually he uses his hypersonic shouting voice thingy to discover some, what did you call it? That the mountain is somewhat hollow. And at that point, he also finds a door. The door opens, and there's like a spider robot thing that bings him with like a debilitating ray of some sort. And he feels weak, and he falls down the mountain, but he's able to catch himself and then get back to like where he's staying so that he can send a message of warning to the X-Men. But the only thing he's able to get through before he kind of passes out is beware of the spider. So, of course, Spider-Man's going to be in this issue. So the X-Men are hanging out. They got Cerebro Fix, and they're looking for Professor X and doing everything they can. And then they get a ping on their Cerebro saying there's a mutant nearby. And they're like, and they also get the message from Banshee. So like, well, let's go check it out. And Jean's like, I'm going to stay here and keep looking. You boys have fun with whatever you're doing. Oh, excuse me, that was a big yawn. So the boys head out. Meanwhile, Spider-Man, or shall I say, Peter Parker, is riding some sort of moped or motorcycle through the countryside. He's like, the countryside. As much as I love the city, I love to get back to my roots. And while he's doing that, he sees like a flying saucer. Also, we saw a flying saucer earlier capturing so that deposited somebody who picked up Banshee and was like, aha, we got them. Now we need to send somebody. And then we see a guy looking at like giant screens, like the typical evil supervillain thing. And he's like, I must dispatch someone, or I must dispatch agent so that we can see the X-Men, if what they know, and destroy them if we must. And so the saucer shows up and deposits this like robot spider thing that Banshee was fighting earlier, or got quickly defeated by, I shall say, earlier. And Spider-Man fights around with it, and then eventually jumps on its back and uses its like head with the the laser thingy, the vaporizing laser, and points it right at the creature, at the robot, and disintegrates it. And then when he comes out, the thing's gone, the flying saucer. And he's like, huh. Meanwhile, that's right around the same time that the 4 boy X-Men show up, and they're like, oh, hey, look, there's Spider-Man, our old chum. And Spider-Man's like, what's up, homies? And then one of them, I think Cyclops, is like, oh, he said, beware of the spider. We have to beware. And something mutant, something. And they're like, oh, yeah. So then the X-Men and Spider-Man, like, fight, but they're all obviously holding back punches. And at some point they try to chit-chat, but Spider-Man's such a doofus that he can't ever be serious enough to like have an actual conversation. So then they fight a little bit more, and the X-Men team up. The 4 of them are able to somewhat seduce Spider-Man, and then they get a call from Jean, and she's like, I found Banshee, and so you guys should come back. And then they kind of put 2 and 2 together, like, oh, I don't think Spider-Man is the actual spider creature that we're looking for. And so then they're like, all right, sorry, Spider-Man, we made a mistake. We're going to go. And he's like, hold up. No, you're not. I'm pissed now. Something. And I'm more pissed than when I was fighting that spider robot. And they're like, oh, there was a spider robot. That's what Banshee was probably warning us about. And they're like whispering. And Spider-Man's like, hey, you need to listen to me. And they're like, all right, buddy, see you later. And they get back in their Rolls Royce and drive up. And Spider-Man's like soaking wet and just got beat up. And he's like, man, fuck the X-Men. Poor guy. So we get back to the X-Mansion, and Jean's like, I used science or something to triangulate exactly where Banshee was being held, even though when I tried to contact him in the secret crystal that Professor X put in his headband specifically so we could contact him, he didn't respond, but I was able to figure out using cell phone towers or something triangulate that he's here in these mountains in Europe. And the X-Men are like, all right, let's do this. Yeah. So the X-Men have a problem now. And that problem is Daddy Moneybags, who had access to all the bank accounts and funds in the world, he's gone. He got kidnapped, and they're trying to go rescue him from Central Europe. But guess what? Flying to Central Europe is not cheap, even in the 1960s. I mean, it's like $1,200 round trip for like 6 people. But if you're broke, motherfuckers. So they got to find a way to make money. The first thing they do is Warren is like, oh, that's cool. I'll call my mom and dad. And so he calls, and the butler answers, and he's like, hello, Master Warren. And he's like, hey, are Mummy and Daddy there? And he's like, oh, no, they're on a cruise for the next couple of weeks. And Warren's like, oh, fuck, I totally forgot about that. Well, let me go to the bank and see if I can get a loan. And so him and Jean and Cyclops head over to the bank to get a loan. And they're like, no, we're not just going to give you a loan. And it's like, no, please, my mommy and daddy are very rich, and they will pay you back immediately as soon as they return from their cruise. And the bank's like, no. And so then they get back in their Rolls Royce and drive away. And I appreciate Stanley for having the bankers be like, is this some sort of fucking like college initiation prank? Like these dudes came in asking for a loan of like $2,000, and we turned them away because, I mean, we're not just gonna give money to a bunch of like random people. And then they drove off in a Rolls Royce they could easily sell for so much more money. So then the X-Men are like, I know what we're gonna do. We're gonna get jobs. And so Jean and Cyclops and Warren go to a construction site to try to work there, and they like help the construction manager get like caught up or something. Like they like put a bunch of steel beams up real quick because of like telekinesis and laser eyes and shit like that. And then the guy's like, cool, this is great. I'll definitely pay you. Let me see your union cards. And they're like, oh, we don't got union cards. And he's like, whoa. I ain't dealing with that shit. I don't need a strike on me. And they're like, oh, man. Meanwhile, Beast and Iceman lose the Rolls Royce because they park it in front of a fire hydrant, or someone does, and it's gone. And so they're like, well, let's go to Washington Square, which is right by NYU where I went. I got one of my degrees, so I know exactly what it's at. And they put on a show. They're putting on a show, trying to get some money, and then that seems to be going pretty well, actually, until Mechanor shows up. You may ask, who is Mechanor? He's just some random asshole. He's got a bunch of like mechanical parts that help him like jump and fight and do all this stuff. And he's like, aha, the X-Men are my companions and they have drawn you here so that I can show you my grand powers and then I can sexually assault this library over here, which he proceeds to do. And the X-Men are like, doggone it, what do these assholes keep associating themselves with us? All it does is cause problems. So they go and they try to stop Mechanor from like fucking the library, which he does pretty good. And eventually he like bounces out. They drive him out of the library because he's just like fucking everything up for absolutely no reason that I could figure out. He just hates books and shit. And then he gets like conked on the head a little bit, and then he's about to fall to his death, and Jean Grey saves him. And then he's like, oh shucks guys, I'm sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. I just got this like stuff and now I'm all sad. And the police are like, hey, we're here to arrest you. And then there's a guy who's like, hold on, police officer. And they're like, why should we listen to you, old man? And he's like, I am something, I'm Mr. Regal. I own this library and all of New York or something. And they're like, oh, damn, they're Mr. Regal? All right, bruh, we do what you want. And he's like, Mechanor, take off your helmet. And he does. And he's like, oh, it's my son, Ted, or something. And he's like, I'm sorry, Daddy. I just was so upset that we don't spend enough time with me, and I'm an adult. I'm an adult man in 1960 or 70, but I'm sad upon. I have to act up because my daddy doesn't give me enough attention. And then they have like a very strange conversation about, oh, I'm sorry, my son. I should have given you more time and spent less time being the richest man in New York. And they go back and forth with that for like a page or two, like no fucking joke. And then the man turns to the X-Men and he's like, I owe you guys. What can I do for you? And they're like, we don't need anything for you. We're just doing our service, our job. And then Beast or somebody's like, whoa, hold on. Can we get a loan from you for $1,200 so we can buy plane tickets to Europe? And he's like, yes, that's nothing. I am so wealthy that is absolutely nothing to me. And I owe you far more for reconnecting my son and I and saving him from being retarded. And they're like, awesome. Now we can fly to Europe. And then we kind of zone out or pull back a little bit, and we see Factor 3 watching from their lair, and he's like, ooh, the X-Men are coming just as I something planned or something. We also find out at the beginning of this issue, there's some hooligans that just like show up to the manor, maybe from Factor 3, I guess, and Beast is just fighting them while they're like doing Cerebro stuff, and then we learn that Cerebro not only can find mutants, but it can cause amnesia in people, which they do to these criminals, and then hypnotize them into turning themselves in. Good stuff. So we finally come to face with Factor 3. But first, we have to hang out on a plane for a while, flying over the Atlantic. Yeah. And then across Europe. While we're flying, the X-Men are enjoying themselves, chillaxing, if you will, when all of a sudden one of Factor 3's space saucers comes around and starts firing at the plane. The plane makes just like the regular commercial airplane, makes some dodging maneuvers. And then the X-Men are like, I think it's after us. We should just leave. So they slow march out, jump out of the plane. And then Cyclops turns around and goes, badam! Blows the fuck out of the saucer. Now the X-Men are in quite the predicament, though, because they are falling into, I don't know, the Caucasus Mountains or something, very quickly. And the one person that is most likely to be able to save them, Angel, his wings are all tied up real tight on his back, right? Because, I mean, they're flying on a commercial airliner. So there's some shenanigans with Jean trying to slow people down and like wearing herself out, and then Warren and Beast are trying to like hold things together, and Beast's trying to help Warren, but Warren's doing like spinning around, but finally he's able to like flex his wings and burst through his thing, and he grabs everybody. But, you know, they're still falling pretty fast because there's 5 of them. And there's one Angel. And so they get Iceman to create like a little ice slide. And there's some other shenanigans there, too, with like Cyclops blasting through like rocks and stuff. And he loses his glasses at some point, so he has to go in blind. But they take the ice slide down, and with telekinesis and everything, they're able to kind of like get to the ground, and then they change into their uniforms and immediately get attacked by some of the spider monsters that Spider-Man beat up in the previous issue. Jean does the Spider-Man trick. She uses telekinesis to force the spider to kill itself, and then we see a couple of men standing up above the X-Men, and they're like, hark, you have 10 seconds to quit, to give yourselves up, or we're gonna destroy you. And there's like a whole bunch of like spider monsters, like more so than they can like really handle. So then they do some distracting stuff. Oh my goodness. Oh, 3 o'clock is rough. Okay, and then they move around and try to escape, but they get caught up. There's like a white smoke that kind of knocks them out, puts them asleep. Then they wake up. They're in this like yellow bubble, and we meet the changeling. Changeling is second in command of Factor 3, and he rolls out and he turns on some screens, and we got like our old cadre of bad mutants. We got Vanisher and Unis and the Blob and Mastermind, and the changeling's like, "Behold, you are on trial for betraying Homo superior kind. We are better than Homo sapiens, and we will prove it." And then each one of the rogues gallery essentially does their little like piece about how the X-Men like fucked him over and betrayed Homo superior for like, according to them, no reason. They were just like minding their own damn business, and the X-Men just came along and fucked him over for tried to take their powers away, turned them into stone, all this shit. And at some point around this time, we see Professor X and Banshee have they're like in suspended animation or whatever in like a different chamber. And the X-Men are like, "We didn't do any of that stuff. Do we get to defend ourselves?" And Changeling's like, "No." And then the true leader of the Factor 3, he's wearing some sort of like dark Final Fantasy 12 judge costume armor setup. He's like, "You are found guilty." Oh no, Changeling says, "You are found guilty and you will face death." And so then the X-Men get like knocked out again. Oh, before they knock him out again a second time, they tell him the plan is to they're going to kill the X-Men because they've been judged guilty, and then they're going to destroy Homo sapiens, and Homo superior is going to rule. And the way they're going to do that is they're going to get America to release like a hydrogen bomb and a bunch of other atom bombs all to like against everybody to start World War III, and then World War III is going to happen and kill all the Homo sapiens, and then the Homo superior will come in and assert their dominance and rule the entire world. Factor 3 specifically. And they're ha 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 ha, evil plan, go to sleep. They zap them. The X-Men wake up in this like strange machine, and they're like, "Oh, this is like a paralyzing death machine. It's gonna very slowly kill you or something." Adios! And then they all leave. The only people who are there are not Chameleon, Changeling, and the Mastermind. So the X-Men devise a mechanism to escape their bonds. At first they're like, "Oh, use your telekinesis." I can't do that. "Oh, okay, I'll use my I-beam." "Oh, I can't do that." "Okay, I got an idea. Iceman, create some icicles over there, right in that one spot." "Okay, cool. It's melting. Excellent." And the melting water short circuits the machine, and they get out. And then they race back to like where the trial took place, and no one's there, of course. And they're like, "Oh no, we gotta stop them, or mankind's doomed." And then they hear a voice, and it's the voice of the Mastermind, and he's like, "Yes, X-Men, you are doomed. The world is doomed. Ah ha 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 ha." And that's the end of that issue. It's very exciting. So now the X-Men have finally escaped from the Factor 3 stronghold, in just the nick of time too, because Beast starts to get a tingly feeling in his feet and just tells everybody they need to run right now because they got to get out of there because the whole place is going to blow up. And at first they're like, "You're silly, your feet can't tell that." And then the whole place blows up. So it was right. The master of Factor 3 taunts them from inside, like the UFO essentially that he's flying around. Next up, the X-Men head to I don't know where they had somewhere to kind of game plan what they're going to do. It seems like they're back at the X-Mansion. They like take this thing super fast over there. Meanwhile, we get the Chameleon and Mastermind, or not Mastermind, the master of Factor 3, having a disagreement. Chameleon's tired of being treated like garbage, and he's like, "I don't have to listen to you, I can do what I want." And then the master sends like a lightning bolt and almost strikes him dead. And then they go back and forth, and we find out that the master doesn't just want to kill all Homo sapiens, he wants to kill all Homo sapiens and rule the Homo superior. So that's his dastardly plan. Chameleon goes to the area where Professor X and Banshee are being held, and Professor X and him have a conversation, and Chameleon threatens to kill him and is going to slap him real hard, and then the master shows up again. We also find out that he's like bedridden or something. Like there's something about him not being able to move, but then he can move because of machines or something, even though he has all these like powers. I don't know. Guess we'll find out more information later. So back to the crew, they decide to split up. Angel, Beast, and Jean Grey head to Russia essentially to kind of protect a leader from getting blown up to start which will be what Factor 3 is trying to do to start World War 3. And then Cyclops and Iceman head to some missile silo to get them to disarm or to shut down everything so that the missiles don't get sent, which is also part of Factor 3's like plan. Iceman and Cyclops don't have a lot of luck, and they decide to just like YOLO it, and they burst through a wall and start just like blowing up missiles. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Iron Curtain, as the comic keeps talking about, the crew get to where they need to be, and then Beast starts just fighting guys. The reason he starts fighting guys is because they're about to be seen by a guard, and so he fights him, and the guy lets off a bullet, and then a whole bunch of guys come out, and so he just starts fighting them. Angel and Jean Grey head on inside to try to protect the leader, or like the random leader. I don't know, could be anybody. Joseph Stalin probably. Or to disarm the bomb, and they bump right into the Vanisher and the Blob. So they fight them, and they're able to utilize the Vanisher has some sort of gas attack or something to knock out the Blob, and then Jean Grey picks up the Vanisher with her telekinetic powers. He then teleports out of there, and these like guys that were part of Factor 3 that were with him, they're robots, and they all explode. And they knock out Jean and Angel, who then when they wake up, get arrested by the Ruskies and put into jail with Beast and the Blob. And we see the master of Factor 3 is like, oh, everything's going exactly according to plan, except the Blob being in jail, but whatever, I'm not worried about it. And then we get Blob still knocked out, but the three of them meet up, Beast, Angel, and Jean Grey in the prison, and they're discussing what they got to do next. And Jean is like, I'm more concerned about kind of the side stuff, and it's the comic's doing a good job. We'll see if it's doing a good job. If maybe I'm reading too much into it. It seems like it's doing a good job implying that there's more than meets the eye. That it's not just this war against Homo sapiens that is like the crux of the issue, and that there's some other stuff afoot that could possibly be causing issues going forward. So we finally come to the conclusion of the Factor 3 arc. We get the X-Men, specifically Jean Grey, Warren, and Beast, all hanging out in a Russian prison with the Blob. They are able to escape by just knocking a guard out. And once they do that, they are able to go get the bomb and then make sure the Blob understands the bomb could kill him as well. And then Warren takes it up and throws it into the sky, and then the Ruskies are like, oh geez, I guess they were trying to help us out. They then hop in a saucer and head back to the Factor 3 headquarters. Meanwhile, back in America, Iceman and Cyclops are in the missile silo, and they get accosted by Mastermind and Unis, but they're able to kind of like fend them off long enough to like affect the filtration system, which is what they were going to gas all the people and then launch the nukes off, unbeknownst to them. So they're able to stop that from happening by freezing them or something. And then they get in their own saucer and they head off. So then everyone meets back up at the Factor 3 headquarters. That includes all the evil mutants, which are Unis, the Vanisher, the Blob. Is the Blob there? Yeah, I think he was there. And Mastermind versus the X-Men. And they are about to start fighting, and then Professor X shows up, and he's like, no, you shouldn't be fighting. This guy's the true enemy. He's the one who's trying to screw you guys all over. And then Master Mutant is like, rah, 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 rah. But then he summons like his androids to come fight everybody, sealing his own demise, essentially. Because then everybody, the good and evil mutants, quote unquote, all start fighting and killing all the androids. And then at some point, Banshee like wakes up from his like haze, and he stumbles on out, and he's like, oh, I see what's going on here. And then he uses like a very precise frequency of scream to destroy all the robots. And then the ones that aren't destroyed, they blow up. But also, as part of like his screaming thing, it destroys the robot that was containing the Master Mutant, who's not actually Master Mutant. He's a alien from this Sirius like galaxy who was here to like destroy all living life on the Earth. And he tries to use like a self-destruct mechanism, which works to self-destruct himself so that he's not captured. So he's dead. So problem solved. And then another Professor X rolls up, and they're like, there's two Professor X's. Oh no, one of them must be Changeling, which is very important to remember for the future. I cannot emphasize this enough because it comes up. But so now one of the Professor X's is points at the other one and says, capture that one. That one's a Changeling. And then Jean like captures him, and then they all decide like, hey, you know what? Evil mutant, good mutant. We're all just mutants. We all got fucked. We saved the world. Let's just all go our separate ways and be good. And then Unis is like, next time I see you, which if I recall is never. I could be wrong. We will definitely fight again, and we will be on opposite sides. And then everyone gets in their saucers and heads the fuck out. So the X-Men head back to the X-Mansion, and when they get there, Jean Grey's like, oh, I totally forgot something that's super important. And they're like, oh, what could that be? And she's like, clothes! So the X-Men all get like new uniforms, some of which are very distinct. Like Cyclops' kind of blue. This is like where he gets his like blue Cyclops looking uniform, and then Jean Grey gets this green uniform that comes up again and again. And then Iceman just gets like gloves and boots, which sure. But the Angel has like this yellow uniform, and then Beast has like this kind of black-red uniform, which I think the black-red uniform kind of comes up later on when they're in X Factor, if I remember correctly. But that yellow Angel uniform is like that doesn't last past the 70s. I think everyone was like, our bad. So that's fun. So that's the end of Factor 3. One thing I forgot to mention previously, and so I'll talk about it now because we're going to be done with this arc, is that in this issue and the previous issue, there is the X-Men. We get like the last 4 or 5 pages of the issue are like the origins of the X-Men. So we finally get like how they all joined the X-Manor, essentially, how they all joined up with Professor Xavier. We get like a little short blurb. So in the first one, we just see Professor X is just minding his own business, being like an introvert and not wanting to go out and deal with anything. And then he gets a newspaper, and it's like, oh, the mutant menace is finally coming. He's like, oh, it is about time I left my solitude and did something about it. And then he sees like a TV thing, or like reads a newspaper line about a guy, like a mutant, at a construction site who like saved all these construction people because there was like a falling girder. I think that's what they're called. And he uses his eye laser blast to stop it. So it's Cyclops. And then he gets chased for being a mutant. Oh no, mutants. They're the worst thing ever. And then he goes to like the FBI where they have like their special mutant. And that's where you meet Duncan, who becomes like a regularly occurring frenemy to the X-Men for quite some time. And he's like the FBI guy in charge of mutant affairs or whatever, this like dark secret that the government's hiding from everybody, obviously. And Professor X like rolls on in using his psychic powers and is like, hey, I'm here to help. I want to like protect the mutants and like make sure that they're trained for good and not evil. And then the feds, Duncan and his like associate, are like, yeah, all right, that sounds good. And then that was in the last issue. And this issue, to kind of wrap things up, we focus on Cyclops. And Cyclops is still running away, and Professor X is with Duncan, and they're fed, and they're trying to figure out where Cyclops was, and the police are looking for him, and they're looking for him, and Cyclops is like he's like hiding and running away, and eventually he ends up with like some hobos, and he's like having hobo beans with them, and then one of them gets like super upset because they think he's lying because he's not actually like running away from anything. He's not actually a hobo, so they jump on him, and then the police show up and like, it's the Fuzz, scram! And so all the hobos like peace out. And the police are like, oh, calm down there, Sonny. We're here to help you. We're from the government. We're here to help. And they take off his glasses because they're dummies. And he lasers the ground, and then he gets freaked out, and he like runs off into the woods some more. And he's like, oh, thank goodness I'm immune to my own powers. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any eyelids. Meanwhile, Professor X is able to track down the orphanage, and the orphanage gives him the name of like the eye doctor who like prescribed him the glasses that protect against the lasers burning up because he had like Cyclops had like really bad headaches, and then he put some like ruby quartz in his glasses, or ruby quartz sunglasses, and that like stopped the headaches. And that, it's just like random luck essentially. Cyclops has these ruby quartz glasses that work. And then we go back to we go back to Cyclops, and he stumbles into like this cabin in the woods where there's like a mutant, and then the tagline by Stanley is like, "And thus the first evil mutant is found." Dun dun dun. And so that's a wrap on the Factor 3 kind of like extended arc. See where the X-Men go next with their new fancy costumes, and I'll catch you all later.